For more than 800 years, one face has haunted the collective memory of the human race. It is not a face carved into the pristine marble of Rome, like the calculated stairs of the Caesars. It is not a face painted with the golden halos of the saints, or the serene grace of the Renaissance. No, this face was whispered in fear. Genghis Khan. To the generations of historians who followed his wake, he was a monster, a scourge of God. To cities like Merv and Samarkand, which were effectively wiped from the map, he was a storm without mercy. To the estimated 40 million people who perished during his campaigns, his arrival was quite literally the end of the world. But here is the mystery. Despite being the most powerful man of the 13th century, we don't actually know what he looked like. When you search for him today, what do you see? A snarling barbarian? A savage caricature with a Fu Manchu mustache and a bloodthirsty grin? A beast born only for destruction? History has a dangerous habit. It turns fear into fiction. Over centuries, we have erased the human face of Genghis Khan and replaced it with a mask of terror. Tonight, we peel back the myth. We look past the burning cities and the legends. We ask a forbidden question. What did the most feared man in history actually look like? The image of Genghis Khan as a mindless, demonic butcher was not born on the Mongolian steppe. It was a weaponized narrative born in the ink-stained pens of his enemies. Think about the perspective of a Persian scholar in 1221. Your world, a world of libraries, irrigation, and philosophy, has just been dismantled by a force you didn't know existed. To explain this trauma, you don't describe a man, you describe a demon. The Persian chroniclers described him as a freak of nature, possessing cat-like eyes and a terrifying, inhuman aura. The Chinese scholars, viewing the Mongols as uncivilized, painted him as chaos incarnate, the antithesis of Confucian order. The European monks, hearing rumors of the Golden Horde, wrote of a Tartar king sent directly from hell as punishment for the sins of Christendom. Why did they do this? Because fear needs a face it can exaggerate. The Mongol armies moved faster than anything the world had ever seen. They didn't march, they flowed. They appeared without warning, struck with the precision of a modern surgical strike, and vanished before a formal resistance could even put on their armor. To civilizations built on thick stone walls and rigid traditions, this kind of warfare felt supernatural. It felt like the devil was at the gates. They couldn't admit they were being outthought by a nomad, so they told themselves they were being hunted by a monster. But we must remember, monsters don't build empires. Men do. To find the real face of Genghis Khan, we have to look at the forge that created him. The Mongolian steppe is not a gentle place. It is a vast, high-altitude plateau where the temperature can swing 60 degrees in a single day. There are no cities to hide behind, no forests to disappear into. There is only the horizon, the wind, and the relentless pressure of survival. On the steppe, mercy is a luxury that no one can afford. Genghis Khan was born with the name Temujin. He wasn't born into a golden palace. He was born into chaos. When he was just a boy, his father was poisoned by a rival tribe. His own clan abandoned him, his mother and his siblings, leaving them to die in the wilderness. For years, the boy who would become Great Khan survived by eating roots and rodents. He was kidnapped. He was enslaved. He wore a wooden collar around his neck. This was not a childhood that produced
softness. It didn't produce the flamboyant arrogance of a king. It produced a singular, terrifying focus. Every line on his face, every scar on his body, was earned in a struggle against a world that wanted him dead. So if we strip away the barbarian costumes of Hollywood, what does the evidence tell us? While no contemporary portraits survive, we have the secret history of the Mongols and descriptions from those who actually met his descendants. When we apply modern forensic logic to these accounts, a very specific image emerges. He would not have looked like a pampered emperor. He was a man of the outdoors. Skin. His skin would be weathered, deeply tanned and sun-scorched from decades of exposure to the high UV rays of the Mongolian plateau. Structure. High, prominent cheekbones hardened by the freezing winds of the north. The eyes. Accounts often mention green or cat-like eyes. While this is debated, it suggests eyes that were piercing and light-colored, narrowed not by cruelty, but by a lifetime of squinting against the glare of the sun and the dust of the charge. There was no crown, no jewels, no indulgence. Genghis Khan famously dressed like his soldiers. He ate what they ate. His face was a map of wind, dust, and sheer physical exhaustion.
When modern AI-assisted reconstructions remove the rage and the sneers found in old paintings, what remains is something far more unsettling than a monster. It is a face of absolute calm. Here is the truth that history is often too afraid to admit. Genghis Khan was not driven by madness. He was driven by clarity. In a world ruled by bloodlines and divine right, Temujin broke every rule. He promoted his generals based on merit, not who their father was. He welcomed engineers, doctors, and scholars from every conquered land. He practiced religious tolerance at a time when Europe was burning heretics. But that pragmatism had a dark side. He was a man of his word, and his word was often an ultimatum. Contemporary accounts describe him as a man who listened more than he spoke. He would sit in silence, observing, calculating the strengths and weaknesses of everyone in the room. His face didn't need to show anger. In fact, anger was a liability. On the steppe, if you lose your temper, you make a mistake. If you make a mistake, you die. This is why his gaze mattered. An emotionless stare does not invite negotiation. It signals inevitability. When he looked at a city, he wasn't seeing people. He was seeing a puzzle to be solved. That is what truly terrified his enemies, not his barbarism, but his cold, calculating logic. As the Mongol Empire expanded, stories began to move faster than the horses. Entire cities would surrender the moment they saw the dust clouds of the Mongol vanguard on the horizon. Most of these people had never seen Genghis Khan. They didn't need to. They had seen the idea of him. Fear became his most effective weapon. He understood that if he destroyed one city completely, if he made the monster real, the next 10 cities would open their gates without a fight. The face of Genghis Khan became a psychological tool. He allowed the rumors of his cruelty to grow. He allowed the world to believe he was a supernatural force. The more distorted and terrifying his face became in the minds of his enemies, the easier it was for him to rule. But behind the smoke of the burning cities, the real man remained distant, unreachable, almost faceless. We cannot talk about the face of Genghis Khan without talking about the blood on his hands. This cannot be softened. The Mongol conquests were a demographic catastrophe. Millions died. Entire cultures, languages, and irrigation systems that had existed for millennia were erased in a single generation. History was rewritten in blood. But here is the contradiction that makes his face so disturbing. Monsters do not create legal systems. Monsters do not establish the Silk Road, creating the first global trade network. Monsters do not unite hundreds of fractured, warring tribes into the largest contiguous land empire in human history. Only a human can do that. A human who is capable of both absolute order and absolute annihilation. When we look at the face of Genghis Khan, we aren't looking at an alien other. We are looking at the extremes of human potential. So, what did the most feared face in history really look like? It did not scream. It did not sneer. It did not need to. It was a face that watched. It calculated. It adapted. And when the moment was right, it acted with a finality that changed the course of human history forever. Genghis Khan was not terrifying because he was a monster from a fairy tale. He was terrifying because he was a man perfectly adapted to a world of violence. A man who looked at the chaos of his time and decided to impose his own version of order, no matter the cost. We look for a monster because it's easier to handle. If he's a monster, he's not like us. But if he's a man, then we have to admit that the potential for that kind of world-shaking power exists within the human spirit. The face of Genghis Khan is gone, buried in a secret grave in the Mongolian wilderness that has never been found. But the shadow of that face? That shadow still covers the world today.